My name is Tish. I'm really pleased that we've had a meeting in Leeds. I've been following these for a good while. I'm here not just as speaking up for parents who can't speak, because it's very difficult for parents to speak up on this topic, but I'm also a feminist. I've seen that we get called, I think I've been accused of being a Christian fundamentalist, a right-wing, a fascist apparently, so just to be clear, I'm actually left-wing, I'm an atheist, I'm a feminist, and I'm an active member of the Labour Party. Having said that, I think all political parties, all without exception, are sleepwalking into a nightmare scenario for women, children, and for young people of both sexes. I'm one of those old-fashioned feminists who believes that gender is a social construct. This is me with my lippy and my high heels on, because I refuse to identify as 5'3". And the idea of a female essence or an innate gender identity is set in women's rights back decades. It really is. That doesn't mean that I dismiss the existence of people with gender dysphoria, which I don't think is unconnected with gender stereotypes being so rigid. I don't, like many people, I've been very supportive of trans rights, and I was relaxed about the provisions in the Equality Act 2010, because I thought, well, it protects gender reassignment, but it also protects sex, and we know the legal fiction, it's a bit of a fudge, but I don't know how else you could have done it, so it seemed like a kind, inclusive thing to do, and I was pretty relaxed about it. What's happening now is completely different to that. It is completely different. Women's concerns are routinely dismissed as transphobia, but there's a complete unwillingness to listen to women's concerns. Who would have predicted that? So before I want to go on, I am going to talk about trans activists very particular, but I do not think they speak for the totality of the trans community, many of whom are speaking up for women. And I want a special mention of Debbie Hayton and Christina Harrison, who I've had lots of dialogue with and are great on this. And Miranda I also have dialogue with as well. So to me, there's a world of difference between what we used to think of trans rights and what feminists often call the TRA, often with a slash that says men's rights activists, because it's very similar. Trans activism wants us to accept the mantra, trans women are women. Not just trans activists, seemingly every politician as far as I can work out. They're asking us to accept that males born and socialised as male are no different to women. We're now being told that mentioning our biological sex, our reproductive functions, we can't even mention them at a women's march. The idea that women are oppressed as a reproductive sex class is unmentionable. We were renamed cisgender or non-men. That's the Green Party. At the same time, women are being told some women have a penis. Get over it. Males are self-identifying as women and taking women's posts and prizes. We even now have the notion of a part-time woman. Philip / Pippa Bunce, who has just taken a women's accolade and identifies as a woman only part of the week, and as I call that, he identifies as a man for the salary and a woman for the photo gallery. The word women is deemed problematic by the British Medical Association, who advise members to talk about pregnant people. You can check that, that's true. Companies are calling us bleeders and menstruators and then trying to sell us tampons. Good luck with that as a marketing strategy. As we know, a billboard using the dictionary definition of woman, adult human female, is now deemed to be akin to hate speech and has been taken down. Thank you, Adrian Harrop, for that. I think he does a favour. For those of us online and involved in this debate, it's not new. But if you try telling people outside of gender-critical circles, who are mostly women, the first thing you've got to do is convince people that you're not actually stark raving mad, because they can't believe this is actually happening. That this has now gone way beyond asking to be included. as if you were a woman. Women are now actively having to resist being colonised. If I was a men's rights activist, I would salute the tactics. Gaslighting women with truth inversion, calling us TERFs, celebrating violence against women, openly denying lesbians the right to exclude a male-bodied person from lesbian sexuality. If that's not familiar to you, if you search the hashtag cotton ceiling, it's all over there. This is just a snapshot of all the reasons that after 14 years of the Gender Recognition Act, this is suddenly an issue. Did all these lefty, tolerant, progressive women just wake up in 2018 and decide to be hateful? No, we're dealing with a new wave and a new set of demands. There's a reason that George Orwell's 1984 pops up a lot in this debate, and a reason why I recently read it. And this quote jumped out at me, and it is, they could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasp the enormity of what was asked of them. Well, women are starting to see the enormity of what we've been asked to give up. We've been asked to give up even our words. If women can't name our sex, then the injustice that arises out of our sex will be impossible to fight. Woman is the one word that includes us all, whether we bleed, whether we breed. So it is important. I'm not going to accept being told to enjoy your erasure by someone who lays claim to womanhood. I do not accept the appellation of cisgender, which is an insult. I do not identify with a gender stereotype that limits and restricts me. Women need to resist the dominant discourse which replaces sex with gender. Gender is an identity, sex is a material reality. I'm not sure how many people have woken up to this, so let's be clear. Stonewall are actively campaigning for the removal of the protected category of gender reassignment and replacing it with gender identity. They're also advocating, and these are Stonewall's actual words, to remove exemptions such as access to single spaces. I never expected in my life that I would have found myself opposing Stonewall, but here we are. And interestingly enough, as we have just been thrown out of a Leeds City Council building, because we were going to be there, I wasn't going to name the council, but anyway, Stonewall seemed to be advising a lot of people, a lot of bodies. A lot of councils are misrepresenting the Equality Act 2010, which is important because they've got a public duty to monitor protected characteristics in the Equality Act 2010. And when I checked, Leeds City Council had removed sex and substituted gender. So I got them to remove that, did it on Twitter, and then when I went back, they changed gender reassignment, which is a protected category, and added /gender identity. It's all out there, this is what the intention is, and they don't want us to talk about it. Why is that? So, you know, Leeds City Council, therefore, I'm not entirely surprised at today. So to end that bit of it, yes, the Gender Recognition Act consultation is important, and fill it in. So all of this debate, which we've been told to skip, matters very much to me as a woman, but I also want to talk about rising rates of teens with gender identity issues, and that is a phenomenon called Rapid Onset Dysphoria, which people want to deny exists, but it does. And that's a sudden onset of gender identity issues in teens, some of whom showed no signs before or previously identified as lesbian or gay. Those parents, they find it very difficult to speak publicly because so I follow a lot of these in other media, so I'm here to speak up for those parents here. Many parents are resisting the celebratory narrative about transgender children, but find it difficult to speak out. It's not just the public opprobrium, they've obviously got private issues with a troubled and confused teen. So it is much harder for those parents. For every parent who's appearing on Victoria Derbyshire with a gender confused teen or even younger, embracing seemingly their child's desire to escape their biological sex, there are other parents terrified into silence. If they vocalise disquiet about what their child is going through, especially on social media, there are trans activists at the ready to tell them that they are bigots, they are child abusers. I even saw one mum told, your child will commit suicide and it will be your fault. And that's not uncommon. So I want to look at the rise in gender dysphoria and just look at, since 2010, the rate of girls identifying as boys has increased by over 4,000%. You'll know that Conservative MP Penny Mordaunt she's ordered an inquiry into females with gender identity issues. But please don't forget, the rise in boys has also gone up by, I think it's 1,150%. That needs looking at as well. It's also worse than it looks, because my understanding is that those statistics come from referrals to gender identity services. Any parent with any sense knows that, in fact, the old protocol of questioning gender identity, of therapeutically trying to get a child to reconcile with their biological sex, which after all is the least intrusive, the least medicalised, not a lifetime dependency on hormones. Gender identity now is such a sacred cow that the path to medicalisation and affirmation seems to start very early on. So I think there's a lot more than that of parents, of kids who are identifying in this way. Sorry, that's my bad eye again. So this spiking cases to me has got all the hallmarks of a social contagion. It looks eerily similar to the epidemic of anorexia, which blighted a lot of my contemporaries in their teenage years. I think there will be backlash to this, and I think this is why some transsexuals usually identify as saying that they're worried, I think, that if there is a huge scandal of trans regrets, detransitions kids, which I think we're already seeing a bit of it, they worry that actually then there will be more gatekeeping and more resistance and less acceptance of a trans, and I think that is a real danger. Now then, I need to go back and find my page again. Right, another concern for parents is the use of trans suicide stats by trans activists. How many times have trans narratives included phrases such as better a live daughter than a dead son? There are actual charities who get government funding who use misrepresented suicide statistics. There's someone who actually gets a lot of play on British television, who's the CEO of Mermaids, and she's said, she's openly said, tell that to the 4 children in my area who committed suicide last week. That's factually not true. What other civil rights movement has weaponised suicide to scare parents into compliance with the medicalisation of kids? Why are the media routinely allowing activists to repeat suicide statistics without fact-checking them? So there's 2 things for parents of gender dysphoric teens I found really useful in my research. One is, funnily enough, the Gender Identity Service itself, which actually says on its site, the majority of the children and young people we see do not self-harm, nor do they make attempts to end their own life. Although there is a higher rate of self-harm in the young people who are seen at Gender Identity Service compared to all teenagers, it is a similar rate to that seen in local child and adolescent mental health services. And yet, the figure that goes out all the time on the media is that 48% of trans kids attempt suicide. And if you search it, Paris Leeds uses it all the time. So I'm going to quote some of Stephanie's work now, so I hope I get it right. Some parents that I know found this really useful, which is on transgendertrend.com, and it's to just drill down to where that 48% figure comes from, because it gets quoted a lot and it's terrifying. The sample size was 2,078. Only 120 respondents identified as transgender. 27 of those were under 26 years old, and of those, 13 respondents have reported having attempted suicide. So the 48% figure is based on 13 cases. Parents are frightened out of their wits because of the media coverage, and even the Samaritans, they ask for factually accurate and responsible media coverage, and this includes that you don't attribute suicide to just one characteristic of the victim, because if you do, it's shown to increase, or research has indicated it may increase the likelihood of suicide attempts in the group identified. So my take on this is that suicide figure is not used responsibly, and it's used for a purpose, and it's manipulation. So thanks to Stephanie for work for that, because that's hugely reassuring for a lot of parents. There are also a lot of medical practitioners out there that you can find who will explode the myth that puberty blockers are a benign way to halt the wrong puberty and are fully reversible. Again, this is a highly contested claim and it is quoted all over the media with no fact checking. There's a great endocrinologist called Michael Maidlaw, who's very generous with his time, and he's on Twitter if anyone needs to get some actual science on that. There is a history of using early onset puberty drugs, but for girls when they had early onset puberty. There's no significant history of using it to stop children experiencing puberty at all. I could quote your research. If there's any parents who want links to source, I can do that afterwards. I would just watch a bit of Jazz Jennings. When Jazz Jennings, who's a YouTuber, no puberty at all, and her surgeons say all the time, this is groundbreaking, this is groundbreaking. It's groundbreaking because the way to construct a facsimilar vagina, which they call a neo-vagina, was to invert the penile tissue. That's been done for a long time. If you block puberty, there isn't enough penile tissue. And so it's not me, it's those surgeons who keep saying, yes, this is groundbreaking, this is read for that experimental. It's experimental. So back to gender dysphoria, the treatment protocol used to start with exploring the gender dysphoria and working therapeutically with the child to try and reconcile themselves to their biological sex. Now we have a policy of affirming and a narrative of born in the wrong body. I think that's another reason why parents are a little bit concerned about going to therapeutic practitioners. In the States now, there are states, I'm in contact with a parent in New Jersey, where the legislation was slipped through to stop gay conversion therapy, quite rightly, but it also included trans identity, which means that some practitioners who I'm in contact with are leaving this area because they don't feel that they can, on principle, not try to reconcile a child with their actual biological sex, but they're pushed to affirm because it's gender identities, and all of those links are out there. So I think that's another. The other aspect of this is about safeguarding. That in other countries it is now seen as a safeguarding issue if you don't actually trans your kid. And I've got sources for that where people, and there's actually somebody in the UK who's a trans activist who says, I advise CAMs regularly to safeguard refer where parents refuse to support young parents' ID as it's abused. So just to finish, the fascinating thing for me as a feminist mum is we were always supposed to be the ones that wanted to castrate men, but a lot of these feminist gender critical mums are actually running their own penis protection schemes. And I'm just waiting now for a trans activist to invert that and say, yes, we knew Freud was right and all these feminists are just penis envy. I shouldn't give them ideas, should I? And just to say, if there's any kids who stumble on this and you hate your parents because they won't do puberty blockers and they're not encouraging surgery and they're not agreeing to you getting cross hormone blocker, they do love you. This is not coming out of a place of hate, it's absolutely coming out of a place of love.